group. My name is Sonny Enebi. We'll be standing in for Pastor Itua Ighodalo today. He may join later. He's a bit unavailable at the moment. He's a bit unavailable at the moment, but I'm sure if he's free, he will join us later. So you're welcome to the second edition for the year. Our expectation was that we were going to continue on the trajectory that we started with last week, but we have a very special guest today that will be talking to us about something very interesting. Let's see how all of that can tie into the economy and how it can work best for us in Nigeria as well. My name is Sonny Enebi. We'll be standing in for Pastor Itua Ighodalo today. He may join later. He's a bit unavailable at the moment. All right, he's a bit unavailable at the moment, but I'm sure if he's free. I was hearing myself back. Was that just me or something is wrong?
No, I think it was the live stream that gave the feedback, but try it again now.
All right. So am I on now? Are we good to go?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jumoke, because I was hearing myself back in that space. I thought something was wrong. Okay, great. So today we are going to be discussing with a gentleman who is an enviropreneur. I'm trying very carefully to pronounce that thing correctly, but I'm sure you correct me when you come on. And we're going to be talking about climate investment opportunities for Nigeria. I do know that the world is moving green, and a lot of organizations and indeed countries are insisting on corporations operating in a green manner. There are some products now that people are boycotting because they are not being produced in a green-friendly manner and all of that. I remember when I was working in the bank, and this was so many years ago, part of our requirement for even granting facility was finding out from the individuals how they produce their product, whether it was environmentally friendly. That carried some points. If it wasn't, it will probably impact the kind of rates you get from the bank, or you may not even get that facility at all, depending on how you produce your product. So I do know that climate investment is a very serious thing, and advocates have been crying about it for a very long time, but I guess the rest of us that are not very well informed have not been taking it that seriously. So today we are going to be digging a bit into that, and with us to do justice to that topic today is Mr. Igwebuike Ijoma Stanley. He is the CEO and enviropreneur for Schrödinger Green Tech Advisory. It's an organization that is based, let me see here, is the CEO of, like I said, he's a board member of the Climate Strategies UK, a London-based global climate change governance think tank. Mr. Igwebuike is also the Nigerian country representative for the World Council for Renewable Energy, a renewable energy advocacy organization based both in Germany, and I think they have an office in Abuja here. He's very knowledgeable and is an expert in this field. He's been in advocacy and trying to get people to comply for a very long time. He's been working in this area for quite a while. And he's going to be telling us today some of the things he's been doing, some of the successes they've recorded, both in Nigeria here and outside of Nigeria, and what are some of the challenges he has encountered in trying to get both corporates and governments to comply with some of these green energy initiatives that they try to push around the world. So without wasting much time, if I have left anything out, we'd like to introduce and welcome our special guest, Mr. Stanley Ijoma. Let me get the other name, Igwebuike. Did I get that right? Igwebuike. Mr. Stanley, are you there? Ijoma. You're welcome.
Okay, yes, thank you. Good evening.
Yeah.
Yes, you got it right. Igwebuike.
Okay, okay, all right. I was being careful not to mispronounce your name. So you are welcome. You can, if I missed anything out of your CV, you may want to add that, and then you may want to introduce this topic. What is this whole climate investment about? For those that are not very knowledgeable in this field, you may want to break it down for us so that we can know what it is.
Okay, thank you very much. I have a few slides. I don't know, I need to share my screen. Would I be able to do that?
I'm sure.
Yes, you are able to share your screen.
Okay.
Okay, just give me a minute. Let me. Okay.
Are you having challenges with sharing your screen?
Yes.
Can he send the document to?
He can send it to Pastor Olu or myself, and then we'll share it from here.
Okay.
You can forward the slides to Pastor Olu via WhatsApp, and one of us will share it.
Yes, that's what I want to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I've shared it. I've shared it with you.
Who did you send it to?
Olu, Pastor Olu.
Okay, Pastor Olu. Okay, that's great.
Okay, while we are doing that, can you please put on your video, then we'll start. Tell us about yourself more, then we'll upload this and we can start the program.
Okay, yeah, can you see me now?
Yeah, we can see you. Right.
Okay, so good evening. So my name is Igwebuike Ijoma. I'm an environpreneur and I sit on the board of Climate Strategies based in the UK. Climate Strategies is a global climate change governance think tank dealing with policy, climate policy, and science research, to policy that is informed and backed up by science, robust scientific research. And I also am the Nigeria country representative for the Bonn, Germany-based World Council for Renewable Energy. The World Council for Renewable Energy is a global renewable energy advocacy organization. And we've been pushing for the transition from a fossil fuel-based world to a renewable energy powered global economy. And back here in Africa, I run a Schrödinger Green Tech, where we is an advisory and consultancy firm that deals with climate investments, and where we bring the experience and expertise that we've developed globally in developing frameworks and policies and influencing and informing climate action to the advantage of our country, the national government, the federal, the subnational government, companies, and businesses in Nigeria. So I'm happy to be here, and I must commend your organization for what you're doing. So if I have your permission now, we can go ahead. I have a couple of slides. We'll I don't know how much time I have, so I can really know exactly how I'll be proceeding.
I think it's really about engagement. So if you take maybe 30 minutes,
Okay.
not more, and so that we can ask questions and then we can.
I prefer the interactive. It's an interactive session. So let me just throw in a couple of slides here. Then that will also help us in terms of the kind of questions we'll be asking and the direction the conversation will be going. So this is the topic today that we're dealing with, is international climate investments. This is $1 trillion opportunity that Nigeria has not really been leveraging. This is where we come in to really bring the opportunity to let the decision makers, both at the political level and at the corporate level, understand the opportunities that are available, beyond oil and gas budgetary resources, which has been a major distraction for Nigeria. Next slide, please. Next slide. So this is really the best way, like Lincoln said, to predict our future, both as a country and as a company, is to create that future. And climate investment is the future because of the crisis of environmental degradation, biodiversity loss, deforestation, which these crises are really existential crises and threatening to wipe humanity wipe humanity into extinction. So here, if you're looking at the slide in front of us, we're looking at why do we have climate investment? We have climate investment because it is part of the solution to really pull us from the brink. Because of global warming, which is the gradual increase of Earth's surface temperature, and of course, climate change, which is global warming, is reinforcing and influencing and fueling climate change. Because of this gradual increase in Earth's surface temperature, it is now causing long-term change in global weather patterns, global, local, regional weather patterns. So we are beginning to see a whole lot of freak weather events, and this is really disrupting, the balance that we have in our ecosystem and even in the economy. You will also, I think I need to make this point, which is what we don't hear often, and which is what our economic managers and politicians do not really tell us often, that the economy is a subset of the environment. So the economy draws from the environment. And if our environment is not sustainable, then it's going to affect our economy. And this is what is happening here, in Nigeria and in Africa and elsewhere in the world. Next slide. So this is part of the solution. And climate investment is some kind of cost correction. So how do we fund the technology transition? Because what we're experiencing is caused by human activity. So we have too much of the greenhouse gas emission in the atmosphere, and these gases trap heat, and this heat is what is causing global warming, and global warming is now what is driving and fueling climate change. which is now disrupting every economic sector that we know. And it's also important for us to know that, all our activities, every economic sector you can think of, it's either is contributing to climate change or it is being affected by climate change. And this is why businesses will really need to, critically look at this phenomenon of climate change and now see what risk this poses to them, to their business and to their supply chain and to the market that they are serving. And it is from that evaluation that we'll be able to extract the opportunities. Because each time we mention climate change, people think of gloom and doom. But with climate investment, that is actually the boom of the whole phenomenon and discussion around our economy and our community to the disruptive and destructive impacts of climate change. So this is the core of what we are saying today, that climate change is already influencing the context within which so many decisions are made: environmental decisions, political decisions, economic decisions, commercial decisions, trade decisions. So, and
Pastor Luke, can you let him know he's
our
frozen? Okay.
companies and businesses, how can we benefit from this phenomenon, this reality that we are facing today? How can we benefit from that? How can state governments in Nigeria, and every day I hear them crying that they don't have resources, that they are fiscally challenged. So how can they expand their IGR and foreign direct investment flows? And this is where climate investment comes in. Next slide. So this is the local context. When we talk about climate change, it is not abstract. What we are seeing before us is the Lake Chad. The Lake Chad is what I call a miracle in the Sahel. It's 25,000 square kilometers body of water. And it has lost 90%, more than 90% of its water body. What this means is that it has stripped 90% of the livelihood of the people and families and young people who are depending on the lake, for centuries, for decades, depending on that lake for their own livelihood. So as the lake is drying up, more and more people are thrown into the unemployment market. And then that's why we have a whole lot of insecurity and insurgency around the Lake Chad region. Now, the insecurity we have there, it's not peculiar to Nigeria, because it's the same phenomenon that's also affecting the 4 Lake Chad countries of Niger, Chad, and Cameroon and Nigeria. Next slide. So this is the local context. And because of this kind of challenge, how do we rebuild? How do we recharge the Lake Chad? So you can imagine the level of investment that will go into recharging and restoring Lake Chad. And this is where those opportunities are. Now, environmental issues anywhere in the world today make global headlines. And it's also true that any effort or any business that has remodeled its or recalibrated its business model to be able to contribute solution and not be part of the problem. Because remember that it's because of our linear, wasteful, inefficient economic model of the last century that is causing this problem. So now we are looking at moving away from that and moving towards a secular, efficient economic model, which will allow us to conserve resources and to use less to achieve more. So this is the Guardian of UK, and you can see the headlines there. Onitsha, the city with the world's worst air. This is bad press, both for Anambra State both for nature and and for Nigeria as well, And then Lagos is there in the news, choking on your commute, how air pollution is strangling Lagosians. So these issues, how do we solve these problems? How do we target, the roots of this problem? And this is where climate investment comes in, and this is where businesses will really need to, retool and build their capacity to be able to look at these issues. So, this is also part of the global context that I wanted us to see what climate change is causing and under which scenario, the 1.5 scenario of global warming or 2 degrees, extreme weather events, species are going into extinction, water availability. There is a challenge with that. People are being displaced. We have what we call climate refugees now, people who are being displaced, and we have them in Nigeria, even though we've not been able to fully dimension those communities that are on the front lines of this climate change. So next slide. So these slides will enable us look at, the trend. So climate change and extreme weather events, the financial losses have been quantified, 60 million USD per hour in 2022 alone. And the infographic before us, in 1990, we have 412 extreme weather events, amounting the losses 66 billion USD. 2016, we have 797, almost 800, almost the double of what it was in 1990. And then almost triple of what the financial losses. So financial losses associated with climate change is increasing. Companies and countries and communities and businesses would also need to build their resilience and reorganize themselves and re-energize themselves and retool their capacity to be able to first preserve the business or preserve the community or the country, and then now see how they can move ahead to now benefit from there. So next slide. It's a similar slide to this. It's also the cost of global warming, 268 billion in 2020. Remember, the other one was stopped at 2016, but this one, as at 2020, we've gone from 129 billion to 260 billion. And between 2016 and 2020, it's just 4 years. So there is a heavy cost, and there is also massive opportunity in dealing with responding to the challenge of climate change and environmental degradation. Next slide. So this is understanding let's go back to the previous slide. One slide, just. So understanding this, what climate change means, for science, for economics of society, law and governance, what do we, understanding this infographic would really mean that we are able to see where our risks are, where properly dimension our risk, and then also properly dimension where we want to benefit from this whole chaos. So this is, a schematic, climate change building, mitigation on the right, adaptation. It will require policy innovation, which you will see in the next couple of minutes. It will require the society, coming together to build their capacity, coming together to do things differently. I mean, we can see the health sector there. We can see the doctors trying to figure out what exactly is going on. You see the scientists at the base. So every intervention would have to align with what the science of climate change is saying. So this is very key. If we talk of capacity building, this is what we are trying to understand, how this affects us. Next slide. So in 2015 in Paris, the global community, I think the most popular meeting of the climate change conference, I think that's the last one in November, December last year. A lot of Nigerians now know that, we have, they now know about climate change, and then, the effort to be able to find a solution and contribute solution to this crisis. So now, that the one we had last year was actually the 28th session of that. So this means that this has been going on for 28 years. So it took us 21 years at COP21 to be able to come to an agreement that we now adopted a global framework to be able to deal with climate change. So you often hear of Paris Climate Change Agreement. That is where countries now said, okay, we are going to do our part. Nigeria submitted what we call the nationally determined contribution, where we said initially that we are going to, on our own, reduce our emission by 20%. And if we get international help, we are going to reduce it by 45%. And when we reviewed it again, we said we are going to reduce the conditional one by 47%. So this is very key. And this is what the businesses, where the businesses will really need to align to this framework. And that is why we are seeing the fossil fuel industry being under pressure. So from 2016, we saw that the fossil fuel industry globally, have been struggling. I think it was the Russia problem in 2002 that actually Russia-Ukraine crisis that actually is now has been propping up the price of crude oil. So post-Paris Climate Change Agreement, what it means is that our civilization has changed. So our technology for us to generate energy, the technology and processes we're using to run our company, the products that we are producing, all of these things will change, right? So next slide. This is very important. All of what we are doing is now anchored by the Paris Climate Change Agreement. Next slide. I talked about the parity of fossil fuel investment and renewable energy investment. And this slide is very powerful in the sense that fossil fuel investment globally has direct and indirect subsidies of 20 trillion US dollars. But then without such subsidies, renewable energy is catching up with it. So what will happen when the government now rechannels the subsidy to be able to develop and support renewable energy diffusion? So this is really, this slide demonstrates the trend going forward. So for Nigeria, this is where the business opportunities are. Sorry, go down a bit. Go to the table. So the next one. What I extracted here is for us to see what the opportunities, the content of our, what we have pledged to the UN to say that this is what we will do to reduce our own emission. And in all of these things here that we have listed, this is where the opportunities are. And now companies and businesses will really need to know their entry points. First, you have to understand what is happening. And of course, you need to engage a consultant or an advisor who will handhold you through this whole uncertain and chaotic terrain. Next slide. So the opportunities are in agriculture, in forestry. Of course, Nigeria has one of the highest deforestation rates in the world, and this is really not good for us. So how do we, invest in afforestation programs? How do we invest in restoring the Niger Delta, for instance? How much will it cost? These are billion-dollar investments. How will our businesses, how will your company, how will the organization, be part of this? How will the organization benefit from all of this? Next slide. So next slide. Next slide. This is just when President Buhari made our commitment in Paris, where Nigeria signed up and to the Paris Climate Change Agreement. So what we are seeing here is 4 Nigerian cities featuring prominently, featuring on 20 most polluted cities in the world. So you have Onitsha, we saw that previously. We have Kaduna there, we have Aba, and then we have Umuahia. So out of 20 most polluted cities in the world, 4 Nigerian cities are there. So we have an opportunity to invest to reverse this ugly, change this ugly narrative. Next slide. So what climate investment will do is to fund the transition from high carbon growth or high carbon intensity to low carbon development. So you see low carbon growth and resource efficiency and social inclusivity. And this is where you now have green economy or inclusive circular economy that brings everybody in a circle rather than a straight line that leaves many people behind. Next slide. So this is a summary of what we are discussing here before we go to the climate investment proper, so we can see the trend and how much of that this is growing. So Nigeria, locally here, we have what I call 3-dimensional extreme exposure and high vulnerability. And then we have a demographic time bomb. This was 2017, 180 million, today 200 and something million. And then by 2050, 410 million. So how are we going to provide for 410 million people? This will be the third, biggest, most populous country behind India and China by 2050. And how many decades away from 2050 do we have? So we have a massive challenge. How do we invest in the energy that will be able to drive an economy of 410 million? How are we able to really provide and make sure that we have an efficient economy? We have an economy that caters to the needs of 410 million people. So this is a challenge. This is a challenge, again, for agriculture. How are we going to sustain our food security and maintain it in the face of climate change? How are we going to ensure food supply, that we have adequate nutrition, and that people are not displaced from their homes, and that we have infrastructure that are future-proof, that are climate-proof? So this is where the opportunities are. Of course, we've seen the failed false promises of fossil fuel, the resource costs. We have almost 100 million people without access to electricity. Nigeria has 7,000 megawatts of electricity in the last 100 years. Niger Delta militancy, like Chad insurgency and terrorism, and economic losses as a result of the public health disaster and all of that. So, but all of these provide economic opportunities for both the government, especially at the subnational level, because we've paid too much attention, or we're paying too much attention to what's happening at the federal government. The states have a massive opportunity here, a rare opportunity for them to really leverage climate investment to be able to increase their IGR and also increase their foreign direct investment flows. Next slide. Next slide. So, of course, we have abundant renewable energy, hydropower, solar, wind power, and geothermal. We are not even exploring geothermal in Nigeria yet. So we talk about everybody that we have. So, but we have abundance of it. Hydropower, small hydropower as well. We're not exploring that as well. So in every state, we have small streams that can power, small communities, small hydropower. It doesn't have Can you hear me?
We lost you there.
Okay.
You may want to turn off your video so that we can hear you clearly. Sometimes the video would, okay, so try it now.
Is it better now?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, so let's go quickly. Let me round up before we go into the interactive session. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is that the opportunities are increasing and the possibilities are expanding. This slide is telling us that, you know, investment in low carbon energy, in renewable energy provides more job, creates more job than fossil fuel industry. So, of course, the UAE COP decision just last December, we've been able, the global community have now adopted, taking the decision to phase out fossil fuel. So for a country like Nigeria that has been depending on fossil fuel for our economy, is a monoproduct economy, we should be paying attention. And our businesses as well should also be, you know, paying attention to what is happening in this space. Next slide. So, you know, I talked about the starting point. Sorry, can you continue going? I'll come back to this. Yeah. So this is really the main slide where we are going to spend a lot more time. So when we talk of climate investment, all of those challenges, all of those problems, all of those opportunities, this is where it's been fully dimensioned. If you can see what is on our screen, this is the landscape of, you know, this is the total climate finance flow, climate investment flow in 2020, 2021 and 2022. And this is 1.3 trillion USD. That was 300 and something billion as at 2011, 2012. So on the left, you are going to see where you have the blue, it's public, you know, the public sector, and then the red below it is where you have the private sector. So the sources of this finance, that's what we have on the left. And then the instruments through which they are disbursed, through which they are diffused, is what you have following that. And then you have where the sectors, you know, where whether this is adaptation or mitigation, because with climate change, if you go back to that climate change building, schematics we saw previously, you see adaptation on one end and you see mitigation on one end. So climate change mitigation, that's where you have investments in energy, right? In renewable energy and sustainable energy. That's mainly mitigation, and investment in agroforestry, investment in afforestation, because afforestation is key because it helps to, it's carbon sink. So if anywhere you have trees, anywhere you have forests, that is the lungs of that community or the lungs of that state. So these things are now, in fact, communities are being paid to look after the forests in their, you know, their forests, so that they can be able to preserve these trees, which constitutes global good. So a tree in any tree anywhere in Nigeria, benefits me because it takes away carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and try to reduce this phenomenon of global warming. So 1.3 trillion USD. And then on the far right is where you have the sectors. And you can see the investment going into each sector. So the waste and water sector, the industry sector, buildings and infrastructure, and other cross-cutting sectors. Then AFOLU here, AFOLU, is agriculture, forestry, and other land use, which is where I was talking about deforestation and afforestation and restoration of degraded land. Then you have energy systems, and then you have transportation. So these are the entry points. And so the question now is, out of this 1.3 trillion, how much did Nigeria benefit? Or how much of this investment came to Nigeria? And out of this 1.3 trillion, how much of that did your company, was invested in your company, or did your company participate in? So this is what this is all about. And now we see that we are seeing the economic sectors. Waste management is a big problem in Nigeria, all the states. And this is something that we can use to generate electricity, for instance. This is something we can use to produce organic fertilizer. This is something we can use to generate gas, biogas, for cooking. So how do we provide the resources? How do we get these resources abroad and then begin to use it to invest and support businesses here in Nigeria to create jobs and then improve target. If we're going to target the sources of pollution and reduce pollution, it means that we're improving our public health. If we address our unsustainable, chaotic waste management ecosystem, it means that we're also improving our public health. Nigeria is still suffering from cholera. This is really embarrassing. Cholera. What is cholera? It's a waterborne disease. So, and if we do not address our waste management system, if we do not clean up our cities, we'll keep on having these challenges. So this is really the main slide here. This dimensions the opportunities. And you see from the left, that is the sources of this investment. Then to the right, where this is where the businesses are now positioned. Energy systems, transportation, that's low carbon transportation. Building, how do you build green buildings, we call them, or high environmentally performing buildings? How do we, deploy sustainable waste management approaches to be able to, generate circular economy? Because if we're going to use waste, which used to be a problem, or which is still a problem, if we're going to use it to generate electricity, that's circular economy we're talking about. If we're going to use it to produce organic fertilizer at an industrial scale, that's circular economy. In fact, this can be downscaled to families. What's the question everybody should also be asking themselves is what's your carbon ecological footprint? How much pollution do you generate? How much emission do you generate? And how do you look at your businesses and then see what part of the waste can be used to create value? We're talking about recycling now. This is also gaining momentum in Nigeria here. So I think this is really the core of what we are talking about here. Go down to next slide so you can see how fast this is growing. Next slide, please. So this shows us, this slide is showing us how fast climate investment is growing. 2011, 2012, 364. 2013, 2014, 365. Between 2014 and 2015, we have 463, 574 by 2018, 653 by 2020, and then from 653 to 1.3 trillion. And then this is for 2022. So maybe by 2020, if by the time the data for 2023 comes in, we should be talking about probably 1.5 trillion. So how much of this are we leveraging, to make sure that our business is profitable, our corporate ensures corporate sustainability as well for our businesses? How much of this investment are we leveraging at the state level, to stabilize our fiscal, our budget, and then to create jobs, to reduce pollution, enhance our public health, to plant more trees, to restore degraded lands? How much of that are we going to be leveraging? So this is, let's go to the next slide. So this is a rapidly growing industry or sector that we should be paying a lot more attention to. Next slide. This slide is just saying that Saudi Arabia on 1st of April, because other countries are readjusting. Remember, Saudi Arabia is an oil mighty country, right? So 2016, take note of the date, 2016, the Paris Agreement was adopted, December 2015. So this is a proactive response to the fact that petroleum, fossil fuel is on its way out, and their economy, which have been anchored by fossil fuel, they are now diversifying and then using the money they are making from fossil fuel to invest in renewable energy and low carbon development. Next slide. So this slide shows us the countries that are benefiting, from these resources. So you have here most of them developing countries, right, where these challenges are very where you have a lot of these challenges, and that's where the global resources is coming here in Africa to be able to help solve these challenges. So Nigeria is not here. You can see, and this is from under the Clean Development Mechanism. So Nigeria didn't, we were all looking at fossil fuel, and while the rest of the world, the rest of the global South, really making a lot of, pulling a lot of climate investment into their economy. And we have a lot of pollution here. We have, our waste management requires a lot of investment. And then we don't have energy. Nigeria's, energy poor, right? So, but then these resources have been there. What we are seeing here is between 2004 and 2013. So the question is, what were we doing? If we say, okay, the government is sleeping, what about the private sector businesses? How about corporate Nigeria? What have we been doing? Next slide. Now, yes. So this one is just between 2015 and 2016. It still tells us that Nigeria, we are not really, we're punching, below our weight. We are still sleeping when, on top of this opportunity. Climate finance, climate investment. We're still sleeping, we're still distracted by fossil fuel. Our budget is still being, indexed to global price of crude oil. So when there is a bomb, where there is instability or disruption in the Middle East, like we're having now, the prices will start coming down and everybody, will start crying. So, but these opportunities are there. On the left side, you have the largest top 10 climate finance donors. On the right side, that's where you have the recipients or the beneficiaries. So if you look at it, you see that Ethiopia is there. You see that Kenya is there. So the question is, again, Nigeria is nowhere to be found. So the essence of this conversation we're having is actually for everybody, business, state government, and all of that, to be able to realize that we have a major opportunity that we're allowing, to leave us, right? So we really need to leverage these opportunities to create shared prosperity for our people. Next slide. So I conclude with this, this presentation with this. So if we are going to invest in this, and the starting point is for a company, for instance, to engage a climate investment advisor or a competent climate investment expert to say, come and lead us through, come and really help us to dimension these opportunities. And this is going to, for a state, for instance, it's going to expand their IDR and increase their FDI inflows. What we can also do, and what this can also lead to, is to develop robust climate finance off-taker project pipelines, because that's where the problem is for this at the state level. And then we don't have MRVs, monitoring, reporting, and verification, and then greenhouse gas emission inventory system. So every company should have their own, because they need to quantify the carbon, the carbon that they are not emitting, because that can be traded on the carbon market. And then there is need for national, regional, and international stakeholders engagement. No company can do it alone, but all of these would have to be designed by an advisor or a climate investment expert. And then, if it's a company or if it's a state, that state can become the popular destination for global climate finance flow, global climate investment. Because if we're able to get number two, because this is really what we need to do when we come in, but at the state level, this is what we need to do. That project pipeline, and this project pipeline can be developed if we do not adopt a programmatic approach to it. This will require, change in corporate strategy, change in policy at the government level, change in corporate strategy, or improvement in the corporate strategy at the business level. So, of course, this will also enable us build what we call climate leadership credentials, right? Environmental sustainability, nature stewardship. So if we're able to build some kind of credentials around these issues, if your company is known as a company or a business that is contributing solution to this crisis, then this goodwill, these credentials could turn into some kind of goodwill. A lot of grants are there, to support businesses who have prioritized this. Of course, this will end for companies, lead to commercial profitability, global brand visibility, and corporate sustainability as well. Because there are businesses and organizations in Europe and America that are interested in investing in companies, for instance, or in states that have prioritized and prepared themselves to be able to receive those investments. We had one of such meetings yesterday with an organization that is, that wants to come into Nigeria, and they want us to guide them to where those investments, can really be useful for them and be useful also for the people there. So if the policies are not there, if the corporate strategies are not there, if you are not doing anything that is visible here, how will people know? So, so that's it by way of conclusion. I think the next slide is just a bit about Schrödinger Green Tech, which maybe if you go there. So we can solve our problems. I mean, Einstein, by the way, is my favorite scientist. So we can solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And that's why we're talking about energy transition. That's why we are talking about the transformation or the transition of the economy from the wasteful linear economic system to an efficient, secular, inclusive economic model that delivers shared prosperity and value for all citizens. Now, the clutter, he said, he goes further to say, out of the clutter, we should find simplicity from discord and then find harmony in the middle of difficulty, right? In the middle of difficulty lies He said we should, out of the clutter, we should find simplicity, right? And find harmony and, squeeze opportunity out of difficult situations. So I think crisis is interpreted as opportunity in China. So this is really where I can stop here. I'll maybe have a couple of slides where we can show you what we do as Schrodinger GreenTech. So that's it. I'll be very happy to get your questions, and then so that we can go into my favorite part of this conversation, which is the interactive session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Pastor Sonny, okay. Thank you, Mr. Or Dr. Ijoma. So I have just one question, and then we'll open it up. So thank you for really putting us through this. Mitigating or the climate change issues requires a lot of discipline and policies that will really help develop strategies to address these climate change issues. In the Nigerian context, how do you think that's going to play out?
The question is about policies, right?
It's policies and discipline, because it requires a lot of discipline from the citizens. Because climate change affects all aspects of life, really, whether from consumption to how you build to just daily living, how we even separate I would say our work habits. I don't want to go into too much details, but it touches every aspect of our lives. And as citizens, it requires a lot of discipline from you as a citizen. And then the government also has to enact policies that would also ensure that all there's compliance with the policies that are in place. So I just want you to speak a little bit about that, how that will play out in Nigeria.
Okay, so our policy challenges. Nigeria ranks very high on policies. We produce a lot of policies, and then the challenge has always been the implementation of those policies. A good example is, I think, a week now, or is it up to 2 weeks, that we got the announcement that the Lagos State government banned single-use plastic, right? So that's a step in the right direction. But the question now is, how did we ban it before sensitizing citizens, or were the citizens sensitized, before banning it? Did we create incentives, for citizens to move away from single-use plastic? Because the truth is, it's actually incentives that will really, that's the smartest way to influence behavioral change, right? Both at the corporate level, at the, think of climate finance and climate investment as incentives, for where this problem, for us to move away from carbon-intensive economic growth. So it takes, we need to change our approach. We need to be a lot more proactive and not reactive. So yes, we have good policies, but it is the implementation. So it requires, I agree with you, it requires a lot of discipline, right? At personal level, but then the citizens, right? You know that we have the people at the bottom of the pyramid, our countrymen and women who are at the bottom of the pyramid, who are struggling to make ends meet. Would this be a priority for them, right? So did we spend time to create incentives for them, right? Are we so it requires a systems thinking. So, and then it requires also strategic thinking as well, because the knee-jerk approach, which is what we usually prefer to use, it hasn't really served us. Again, the plastic ban, single-use plastic ban in Lagos, it's a welcome development. But then the thing is this sustainable? Is the sustainability of those policies? That's where the challenge is. Lagos is doing the ban. I traveled to Rwanda in April 2022, and that was my first time of going to Rwanda. And of course, I've heard about, the green Kigali city and all of that, one of the greenest city in Africa. But then when they sent me the travel advisory, the organizers of the event there, they sent travel advisory and I was shocked. And they said, oh, don't bring plastic to our country. Clearly there. And when I looked at it, I knew that they banned plastic pollution. I mean, single-use plastics and all of that. But then I didn't know it dated back 2008. So you have to ask yourself, comparatively, what Nigeria was doing in 2008 and what Rwanda was doing in 2008 in terms of banning the plastic. So Nigeria is talking about plastic, banning single-use plastic in 2020, 2021, 2022, and 2023. This is what a country like Rwanda already implemented by law. And then warning people who are coming into their country not to bring plastic. So this is a big problem and also a teachable moment for us.
Thank you. And I have just one more question and then we'll open it up. I see one hand up. So we're talking about policies, but is there a broader strategy to include education of the masses on what is required of them? And I live in California and it's one of the green capitals of the world. And I pay a fine if I put plastic bottles in my trash, or if I use too much water to water my grass. And this is just basic everyday living. So this is part of what we live with here. So in having these policies, what about the educational aspect of it? And then what are the alternatives that are being presented to citizens to help them make these decisions to move away from maybe, I don't want to use the word destructive habits that contribute to climate change, but is that part of policies? And Mr. President has entered the room, so I'll probably just hand over to him. So if you can address that, and I'll hand over to Pastor Itua, who just came in.
Okay, so you talked about the example of California, where you are, and then asking if we're doing enough education, enough investment in behavioral change. So when I was answering the first question you asked, first question, I talked about the fact that we usually use knee-jerk approach, right? So using the Lagos single-use plastic ban as a case study here, because that is a kinetic one that is still very much active. Did we design educational program 1 year, 2 years, targeting students, primary school, secondary school, and then telling them to mount pressure on their on their parents and all of that? So you see that if we have done that for the 1, 2 years before announcing the ban, it will be a lot more sustainable, right? So we've not done that. And then you talked about incentives. That's alternatives. And these alternatives are the incentives that we're talking about. So will government create an incentive to say, oh, if you're going to bring this quantum of single-use plastic, for instance, you are going to get tax rebates. And again, for companies, if you're going to make this quantum of investment in your CSR budget and in your operational, decarbonizing your operations in the company, are there tax rebates? Are there incentives to influence good behavior? And of course, I'm not surprised about what's happening in California. You know that most of the US states, you have a lot of climate deniers there. But what you are experiencing now has a lot to do with the climate leadership credentials that Schwarzenegger, right, implemented when he was governor there. And I know that just to tell you what awareness creation, the impact it can have, around 2010, 2011, 2012, Schwarzenegger convened a global forum of governors, and the Delta State governor then was the only governor from Nigeria that attended. When he came back, and people should go and look at it, his record, environmental record, and climate leadership, that singular event helped Governor Duaga sector in terms of the policies. From my own, and that just to that, Schwarzenegger action and environmental sustainability. Some of these
Thank
policies
you.
that we are talking. So,
Thank you.
not doing enough.
Mr. President, do you want to come in now? It's just, I know you can be.
I think you should just continue.
Okay. So, thank you. So I just wanted to add one more thing. You know, when I was talking about alternatives, you talked about the single-use plastic, and this probably is where business opportunities will come in as well, where the alternative would be using whether it's paper, boxes, or biodegradable materials to replace those kind of styrofoams. So that is also opportunities. So do you have like comparison to say, instead of styrofoam, use cardboard boxes or biodegradable materials, and these are the business opportunities for such, because you're talking about climate change economics. So that could also be something that people could look into, providing alternative or solutions to the current situation. Is that something you also do in your institute?
Thank you.
Okay, so yes, this is what we advocate and what we promote and what we where we make our interventions in terms of the alternatives. Again, a lot of this, the government sets the stage for economic productivity, right? So whether our economy is efficient or inefficient depends, largely on the government, and is a function of the calibration of the incentives. So the alternatives exist, but there are no incentives to scale them, right? I'll give you an example. There's a what we call sustainable procurement framework, which is part of what we help states develop and the government to develop. And this is really where we create new markets. So it's only that incentive that will create those new markets. And it's simple. How do you create it? So let's use the example of virgin paper and then recycled paper. Government is still using virgin paper, right, to do their business. This is, what are they doing? They're using the public sector money, taxpayers' money, to be driving deforestation. That's what it means. So how can the government create incentives for us to begin to use what we have to get what we need? We're not doing that. So that is very important, that we use incentives to drive and influence our citizens, our businesses, towards the low carbon, inclusive, circular path.
Thank you. We have two hands up. Can I have Dr. Oladokun and also Said? So usually the way we do this, we'll take two questions or 2 or 3 questions together. In this case, we'll take 2 questions, and then you would answer both of them at the same time. So Dr. Oladokun, please go ahead with your question. We've asked you to unmute.
Okay, there we go. Are we good?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. So I was just saying that it's not so much a question as much as it is a comment. I've been trying to join in on your meetings for quite a while, and just never had the opportunity, but today was really opportune, and I'd like to thank Shadi Fashidemi for sending me the reminder. But just a very quick thanks to the African Leadership Group and to Pastor Itu and the rest of the team for what you're doing. It's extremely invaluable for us as a country, for the very simple reason that leadership, at least the way I see it, is the capacity to bring the future into the present, and you guys are doing a phenomenal job in that regard. Dr. Joma, you've done an excellent job, really, really remarkable tour de force on climate change and investment opportunities, particularly in a green circular economy. So very well done, very strategic, very visionary, and in sync with a lot of the contemporary thoughts in this regard. But I just wanted to
Positive from this end. I don't know if it's the same for everyone.
Sorry, you can't hear me?
We can hear you. It
Can
might
hear
I hear
you.
you now.
we can hear you, sir.
Okay. So I was just going to say, Dr. Ijoma, you said earlier that at COP28, it called for the phasing out of fossil fuels. I just want to caution here that COP28 did not call for the phasing out of fossil fuels, whether it be oil, gas, or coal. What it called for was a transitioning away from fossil fuels, and there's a big difference there. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is we have to be very careful. I'll come to the issues of opportunities and, the business opportunities and policy opportunities just later on. But we have to be careful, and this is the reason why. Prior to the Ukraine-Russia war, it has been extremely difficult in the global financial system to get funding for any kind of energy project on the continent. Now, keep in mind, the West has developed its economies on the back of fossil fuels for over 100 years. Now that their economies are fully developed, what they're saying to Africa, which has an abundance of fossil fuels, is that you cannot use what you have in abundance. However, when the Russia-Ukraine war broke out, they were quick to go to the North Sea to begin to bring in crude from Russia, because suddenly they realized that there was a crisis. The same folk who said they would not fund fossil fuels are now saying that they have an emergency, that they have a crisis. And my question to them is this: what do you think we're dealing with in Africa? We are dealing with an existential crisis when it comes to the issue of energy. So I don't want us to raise our hopes falsely and think that we're going to do away completely with fossil fuels. What we need is a hybrid approach to energy. And Dr. Ijoma, you've done a fantastic job, but I'm just throwing this out to say green is not a panacea for all that ails us, particularly in Africa. You pointed out that Nigeria is not doing very well in terms of raising funds for either climate change or green energy projects. It is not a Nigerian issue alone. It's an African issue. Africa actually contributes only 3% to global carbon emissions, yet receives only 3% of all of global climate funding. It's a serious problem that Africa as a whole has to contend with. And I think at COP28, Africa put up a very, very strong case for itself. The taste of the pudding is going to be in the eating. But I just want to encourage us to say that there are tremendous opportunities for financing. At the African Development Bank, it's going to raise about $25 billion specifically for Africa through what it calls the Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program. And you can look that up. It's called AAAP. I encourage you to get engaged there, as well as with the African Financial Alliance on Climate Change, which again is doing a whole lot of stuff in terms of advocacy, dealing with climate threats, mitigation, adaptation, and then more importantly, the African Development Bank and several African leaders are saying to the West that the same IMF special drawing rights that were made available during COVID. Now, what we need to understand is that the IMF made well over well over, I believe it was, I think it was about $600 billion worth of special drawing rights during COVID to several nations around the world. Africa received only a small portion of that. But that was what the West used to re-engineer its economies during COVID. And we are saying, as Africans, we need the issuance of additional IMF special drawing rights to deal with the problems of climate change, because there's no additional funding coming from anywhere else in the world. A lot of the funding that we're talking about really isn't real money, it's recycled commitments. So if, thanks to the push from several African leaders, we can get to the IMF to issue as much as $20 billion, $30 billion worth of special drawing rights, but issue that through development finance institutions such as the African Development Bank, it can be leveraged 3 to 4 times. So 30 billion becomes about $120 billion. And I think this will help. But overall, I think our approach, and I say our because I'm affiliated with the African Development Bank, is that we have to have a hybrid approach. Going green is extremely expensive, and therefore we have to be very realistic. It's a tricky issue. Green is inevitable, but how we get there is really going to be the crux of the matter. And I'd like to hear a little bit more during this discussion on how we can circumvent the issue of finance moving forward. So that's really my contribution. And again, I want to say a very, very big thank you to the African Leadership Group for all that you're doing. Very much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for your contribution. Can I have Said?
Sorry, can I, because, you know, it's a comment he made, and he has quite a lot to unpack from there, from what he said. So let's just deal with it before we get to the asking for your permission to.
No, please go ahead, sir. We have about 3 more hands up. So,
okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. Dr. Oladotun, thank you very much. And the issues you raised are the issues that are not going to go away anytime soon, because they are touching on climate equity, climate justice, and, you know, the morality and the justice of all of these discussions. But what we are saying is that while, you know, we have been lamenting, we don't lose anything if we begin to harvest some of the opportunities, and then, you know, that are associated, consequential opportunities that are coming along with this whole conversation. The SDR, yes, those are part of the equity and justice issues for climate. Africa's climate vulnerabilities to be given such, you know, emergency and urgency of that was given to COVID. And then you also know about the debt for nature swap, debt for climate swap that is ongoing now, where African negotiators are pushing for some kind of debt relief, but not a debt relief in the conventional sense, but debt relief in the sense that we are going to have the money that we are owing. So instead of paying it back, we are going to now use it to decarbonize our economies. You know, when you look at the position where Nigeria is, you begin to ask, you know, it's a difficult position, right? So we have a lot of oil. We have a lot of, we've had this for, you know, 60 years now, 65 or 70 years. And then we have the level of energy poverty that we have in Nigeria, right? We have the level of, you know, economic deprivation that we have in Nigeria. So these whole opportunities, is there a way that, because it's open to everybody. Is there a way that we can begin to leverage this? You know, while this whole talk about equity and justice and all of that goes on, because if we are to go at our own pace, right, we wouldn't have, it will still be the same issue. So are we, the reason we are having energy poverty, and then the reason we are having this number of, multidimensionally poor Nigerians, is it because of lack of resources, or is it because of lack of, natural resources, or what? So how can new energy, how can the trend, how can renewable energy now begin to help us to power? I mean, there are communities in Nigeria that are, because of mini grid interventions now, that are beginning to see electricity for the first time, And because if we are going to go by grid electricity, maybe the next 100 years, they will not see electricity. But because renewable energy is some kind of plug and play, once the investment is made, in the next 1 month, those people have a mini grid. In the next, if you go out today, buy solar, it takes in 24 hours, you have electricity. So it's a dicey situation. We're not saying that, we are going to throw away, our fossil fuel. No, what we are saying is that we are not drawing on the opportunities that are there. So the alternative is to sit down and say, we're not going to do anything. And then, of course, these people are yet to give us our SDR, and they are yet to agree to our nature for climate swap. Can this thing be going on simultaneously? Under the clean development mechanism of the Kyoto Protocol, there were resources that we would have used to clean up our development. For instance, when we say we want to clean up our development, there are resources that we can use to, use municipal waste to generate electricity. These things are still being done. There are cities that are running on those electricity. In August last year, I was in Poland, and I was at a plant where they generate electricity with municipal waste, organic waste. And that was my second time in visiting a plant. As far back as 2010, I was in a plant in Wales where you have a decommissioned landfill. They are tapping the methane that would have gone into the atmosphere. They are tapping it and using it to generate electricity. So these technologies have been there. How do we get this technology? That's what this whole conversation is all about. How do we, the lowest hanging fruits, how do we use what is happening now, leverage the opportunity to better our lot, to improve our public health? In Nigeria today, we are having almost 100,000 women dying because they are using firewood to cook, for cooking. And when you think of it, should anybody, with the resources we have, Nigeria is more of a gas nation than a crude oil nation. So why do we still have vast majority of our population using firewood for cooking? And this is killing our women. And this is World Health Organization figures, right? Respiratory complications. And of course, it used to be a common denominator for all of us, but vast majority of our people are still trapped in that multidimensional poverty that we're talking about. Why? They're still using firewood to cook. So she was born, or he was born into firewood. The parents, when she was born, the parents were using firewood for cooking. And all of us started from there. Maybe the time that we exited that, varies. So, but for 60 years of her life, she has been using firewood to cook. 60 years, 50 years, 40 years. So this is what we are talking about. How do we leverage these opportunities? Because there is no limit to how much investment we can pull into Nigeria to use it to solve our immediate basic problems. So you are right, the hybrid approach. What this is all about is that we are paying so much attention to budgetary support and what we can generate from our crude oil, and everything is still based on that. And then, so how can we leverage this $1 trillion opportunity? How much of it can we pull into Nigeria, right? So if we have frameworks that we have designed that will help state government pull in $500 million into their economy as investment in low carbon development. Now, if these investments come in, it means that the states will save money first. The money they would have used to do this themselves, they will save the money and use it to attend to critical, essential social issues, paying salaries on time, paying pensions, and making critical investment in health and social welfare. So these opportunities, we need to do more. Why, we are still faced with the equity issues and how much emission we're generating, right? So those issues are there, and I acknowledge them, that we are not, we didn't cause the problem, but climate investment is an incentive for us to really begin to, help ourselves. So,
Thank you.
I hope this conversation is not going to end like, the equity dimension of this climate change issue.
It's a conference conversation.
For bringing this up. And again, the previous funds that the African Development Bank made available, how much of that did Nigeria get? Because we can't get them, or we've not been able to draw on those things because of what I call the project pipelines. A lot of work needs to go into developing those project pipelines and program pipelines that would offtake those resources. And that is what we are trying to see, that we help companies build their capacity, and we help state governments build their capacity to benefit from those funds. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We have a couple more questions and we are coming up on time. So if I could have Saeed, please go ahead and ask your question. And Mr. Charles Iyure, you also have a question.
All right. Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I do echo the goodwill message shared by Dr. Oladokan with regards to ALJ. Thanks for all that you're doing. Before I go into my question, so just to, appreciate all that Dr. Victor rightly said. I was going to react and respond to a few things, but he's taking care of it. But to emphasize here, when we reference a lot of this global conversations around, green sustainability and the movement of green, as it were, most of this conversation are paper talks. When he referenced the numbers and how much Africa got, we need to pay attention to those things. When he mentioned hybrid, I don't think that the plan was to push back, but rather challenge us to begin to think Africa's solution for Africa by Africans, depending on what we have within the continent. With that being said, I wanted to confirm, sir, your presentation was relatively, good. I would just love to see how much of the local institutions do you actually work with in, more from an R&D point of view in developing sustainable policies, ideas, as well as strategies that could be created locally, and perhaps leveraging institutions such as AFDB, to finance some of these R&D, projects or proposals, as it were, to put us in that position where maybe we can have a better chance to negotiate better, from some of this global, conversations and credits, as it were. That's one. Two, we also do know most of, outside of the oil sector, we know most of the local manufacturing entities that are also global representation of the continent that are, contributing to this pollution, as it were, in our own local environment. To focus on Nigeria, to be precise, taking companies like, Coca-Cola, for example. What are some of the efforts your company or institution has done in seeing how we could probably co-develop, programs and initiatives with such institution or company, as it were, to find alternative means of, changing some of the content that they're using for their product. Again, sensitization, working with what we have to correct the bigger picture of what's going on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Can I add one more question? Because Mr. Charles Iyure, please ask your question.
Thank you. It's really more of a contribution than a question. Mr. Dr. Oladokan Victor, you spoke largely and expansively about the use of special drawing rights to find financing for the third world, Africa in particular. That really is what is killing Africa, because money is being issued on special drawing right, and there's no linkage between production and the value of money. It further excludes Africa from what's taking place at all in the world. So the first task must be to understand the concept of money and determine how it's going to play on the various. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
To come and pay.
Someone else is talking.
Yes, please go ahead. We've muted them. Please go ahead.
So at the heart of our problem, basically, is how to use our currency to be part of the international global exchange. Now, I was part of the advisory that dealt with the biggest foreign investment in Turkey, from Izmir from Ankara to Izmir, about 2.8 billion pounds. And in the city of London, the crisis was that because Turkey had an opaque financial system, it would be difficult for that kind of money to go to Turkey. But because they had local technology to drive the process itself, and because it was easy to be able to put all of that money into Turkey and then exit through the dinar, funds already been made from the very beginning. So at the heart of Africa's development is the wrong understanding of the use of special drawing rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mr. Joma, can you take those two questions or comments and address them? And those are all the questions we have. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. So first, I'll start with clarification. I'm not a doctor, I'm Mr. And a lot of people, give me these titles. I'm thinking I'm, in the academy or something. I'm not doctor, I'm Mr. So just to clarify that. Said talked about the local institutions, the partnerships and the collaborations that we're talking about, that we're working with. He mentioned Coca-Cola as well. And so, you see, the issue is that the decision makers, we've been in this space since at least 2010, actively in this space since 2010. And the decision makers, people who make decisions both in government and in the, at the business level, really do not yet understand the ramification of what's happening, or the full ramification of, this whole crisis and the opportunities as well. And I'll give you an example, because we play at we can predict, or because we are actively engaged, predict the direction, that policy or framework, or the direction of flow of some of these resources, or the direction of regulation. So we come back here to, engage our entities. And in 2010, we made efforts to get Nigeria, and that was when the discussion about the Green Climate Fund was going on. And we thought that it would be good for Nigeria to lead in terms of getting the institutions ready. For instance, the National Implementing Entity. I'm not sure we still have one up to now, but in 2010, we made efforts to get one of our institutions with fiduciary capacity to be able to prepare and then get this, play the role of this National Implementing Entity. But, the people we met didn't really welcome the idea. They didn't understand it. Not that they didn't understand it. And then we've also had a couple of things to do in the private sector, which really, faced the same problem, that the decision makers, taking decisions for this, making decisions at the corporate level, have not really been that proactive as well, as much as their counterparts in, East Africa, for instance. So that's a big challenge. And if you, dig further, you are going to see that it's that the awareness level and the capacity building to let people know that, these issues, as much as they are disruptive, that there are also things that we can benefit from them. So it's very difficult to achieve that in Nigeria. But then these things, and that's why when a country like Rwanda banned single-use plastic in 2008, Nigeria is banning in 2020 or so. So that explains that kind of gap. That sometimes some of these organizations are, the company you mentioned, Coca-Cola, because they are international companies, and then they have some kind of they are much more aware of this. I think they are making investments in the recycling, ecosystem. So there are Nigerian recyclers now that I think that's under the Extended Producer Responsibility Program, that they are now beginning to support some of these entities to be able to recycle some of their plastics and then convert them to good use. One of the other interventions that we try to make, I mentioned it when I was answering the question the other time, is what we call the Sustainable Procurement Framework. Now, we know that the opportunities in the oil and gas, we blew it, we've thrown it away, right? We are we have crude oil and we are refining it abroad. That's the only country doing that. But the same thing is happening now with this clean energy transition, because we are still using public sector money, right, to create jobs in European cities and American cities and Asian cities. Why are we not using framework, which is what we have proposed and engaged, that we need what we call sustainable procurement framework? Because what it means is that the taxpayers' money, public money, will procure products that can be procured, that can be produced in Nigeria. So if we have the capacity to manufacture solar here, and our manufacturers, are we leaving them to go and import solar panels, for instance? We have solar manufacturers here, and that's why I mentioned it previously when I was answering the other questions, that we haven't used our resources to create incentives that will really open up our economy and create opportunity, shared prosperity for everybody. So for us, I think the closest example is that we are still using taxpayers' money to go and buy vehicles. So we are still using taxpayers' money to go and buy foreign-made renewable energy equipment. I think that's where the tragedy is. That's where the tragedy is. And if we don't course correct, we are going to also lose in this race. We're going to lose in this race. So having a sustainable procurement framework, we create new markets. For instance, I talked about the virgin paper, fiber. So if the government, gives an order upfront and say, hey, we are going to do this, right? The Lagos State government can for instance, the single-use plastic ban, have they placed an order to say, they're investing, they're placing an order for ₦1 billion worth of sustainable materials, alternative materials to single-use plastic, that anybody who is producing it, that they're going to buy it up. That's how you see, some of this productivity and some of these alternatives, being produced locally here, using our local labor. And that's where the benefits of all of this transition, that's where the benefits are. Because every day, we go on, of course, the equity dimension and all of that. But these are some of the issues. As that debate is going on, we are still using taxpayers' money to create unemployment in Nigeria and create employment abroad by buying products that can be made. These are not high-tech products that can be made in Nigeria here. So that's where the challenge is. Again, if any state government is willing and ready, then we're willing to come in and develop this sustainable procurement framework, and then let's have for 10 years and see what the kind of economic growth we're going to have there, because it's what we call the circular economy, right? So the money you generate there, you use it to create demand for more, sustainable products and services. And then those sustainable products and services, people come in, make investment, pay tax, create jobs, and then you use the money again to create further expand the economy. So it's really not easy. it's very frustrating that you sit down with decision makers and they just don't understand these issues, because this whole conversation, whether it's at the company level or at the state level, these are, top-down kind of issues in terms of executive decision making. The chief executive will have to put his or her feet down and say, this is the path we are going to go. We're going to make investment here, and we're going to get ABC to guide us. I hope I covered, the questions. And again, of course, use of local resources to be able to, make sure that the benefits of some of this transition, the energy transition and the technology transition, that the benefits stay here, with us. So it is the programmatic framework approach. That is what we need to deploy, both at the corporate level and at the national and subnational level. So this is a difficult conversation. People who keep making decisions are still making decisions that are not in the best interest of Nigerians. This happens at the local government, at the state level, at the company level, and at the national level.
Thank you. Probably needs a conference, a few days conference with all stakeholders engaged in this conversation, and the outcome would be recommendations on the way forward. So thank you so much for your time, sir. I really appreciate all that you brought us through. I would now hand over to Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Thank you for providing the platform for this conversation. And, I'm very grateful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Now, Mr. Igwe Ijoma. Thank you so much for those very, very insightful nuggets that you have brought to bear on this issue of investment opportunities for Nigeria in terms of going green, climate change, and the issues on hand. One of the challenges that we face, though, is the cost of going green, and especially the cost of being thought credible or being able to access the carbon credits. I'm told it's a very, very expensive process. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that and what we need to do to bring the cost down, or if it's even realistic for some nations. I don't know if this had been addressed before, but if you can just give me a brief insight into that, and then I'll just give my vote of thanks and closing remarks.
Okay, so thank you, sir. So the going green, which is the energy transition or technology transition, right, is expensive. There is an incremental cost involved. And this is why climate finance, carbon finance, and climate investments, that is the incentive that have been provided to take care of that incremental cost. So they complain about the issue of the process of registration for the carbon market being expensive. I'm not sure that it's the cost that is the problem. I think it's the hard work involved in following through that process. That's where the problem is. There is this mindset that we just want to pick things or stay and be spoon-fed. People come and spoon-feed us, and because other countries are leveraging these resources. So while we are saying, it's expensive, other countries are really, making progress in harnessing these opportunities. So it calls for a mindset change, and this cannot happen if we don't have a programmatic approach to it, rather than a knee-jerk project-based approach, to some of this going green. And I'll give an example. We need a new business model to drive this green transition, because we have also proposed what we call the public-private community partnership, right? This is what we are going to use to drive this transition. what is happening, the PPP has outlived its usefulness because the PPP, it's easy for the government actors and the private actors to collude to, to not to deliver the benefits to the communities or to the citizens. But if we give the community a stake in the project, for instance, you have the host community having, 1% equity in a project that is cited in their community, that will help drive the sustainability of that project. And talking about the new business model, I give you an example again of the 10 megawatt, the 10 megawatt wind power plant in Katsina State that started in 2008 or 2007 by Yar'Adua. Up till now, we have not concluded it. That project has not been commissioned. But I think that's about 250 megawatts of geothermal energy in Kenya has been commissioned like 5 years ago. And it started almost the same time. And that's a much more complex project. So the procurement, because we try to embrace procurement. That's what the public sector tries to do, procurement for whatever motivation. But this transition needs project and program development and not just procurement. So those are where the issues are. The moderator talked about calling for a conference. I think this has gone beyond a conference. What we are looking to do, because we've been talking and then we've
Did we lose him?
I believe he froze.
Sorry, I lost that momentarily. We want to move from PowerPoint to, we want to create a model, for instance. So instead of organizing, like she suggested, we are saying that we want to create a model. We want a subnational government that to come and say, okay, come and create this model in our state. We need a company that will say, okay, come and do this, all these things you are talking, challenge us, for us to design and implement these frameworks in your company or in your state. And that's what we want to see.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. You can see from the comments that everybody has had a very rewarding evening. I do pray that we're able to move the table, move the cards a little bit, and that we do get what we call a serious and sincere government in this country that will do justice to all the things that need to be done. I want to thank everyone that's been on the platform today, especially those who asked questions and made contributions. We're very, very grateful to you all. We do wish and pray that 2024 will indeed be a thoroughly outstanding year for all of us. Jumoke, Sonny, thank you very much. Olu at the back end and Faye, thank you all. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of the evening and a brilliant, brilliant weekend ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Good night, everyone.
Good night and bye, everyone.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Good night, sir.
Good night, sir. Thank you, sir.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.